Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Life Self-Mastery. Today I'm excited to have Rohit Taneja, who's the founder of Decentro Tech, which is building API platforms for banking integrations. Rohit had earlier built Mypoolin, which he sold to Wibmo, and he's also an alumni of IIT Delhi. Decentro Tech has been funded by Y Combinator and other VC firms. Welcome to the show, Rohit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, coincidentally, Rohit here as well. So good to meet you as well, Rohit. And yeah, thanks for having me on board.
Absolutely. I wanted to understand before we talk about Decentro Tech, what was your journey about, getting into startups? And obviously, we'll talk about what is Mypoolin and what made you, start Decentro.
Sure, definitely. So I'll start first from my personal journey, and then we can definitely cover how Decentro and why Decentro came around. So I've been in the fintech space, for pretty much as long as I've known the space of startups and entrepreneurship. Started out in 2014. That was my first venture called Mypoolin. Before that, of course, pretty much like everybody else, was working in a corporate in Sony in Japan for 2 years before, realizing that the startup world was the one that was much more exciting and much more impactful, so to say. Right. And there were a couple of reasons, of course, why I moved back from Sony, in Japan, of course, which is like an amazing country. One was, of course, that like Japan in general is not really a great place for starting up. It's not really a very supportive, country, unlike India or the Valley. So right. That was one, and of course, Sony being a very hierarchical and rigid company, classic Japanese conglomerate, so it's very hard to make an impact there. Came back to India in 2014 with a simple vision of really solving one personal pain point. And my thesis always has been around personal pain points. So it's very hard for me to relate with those pain points, which I have not experienced personally. 2 years out of college, the pain point that we had at that time was how do we really solve for peer-to-peer payments amongst each other, and that too in a fun manner, right? Because college kids and typical millennials don't really like boring applications, right? So we said, okay, like payments have to be fun. Why are they so boring? Nobody likes to pay, and realized that, of course, the only two options at that time were cash or Paytm, and both were equally cumbersome because cash, for obvious reasons, and then Paytm, you had to put the money in a wallet, and then there were limited options of acceptance at that point of time. So thought that something like bank-to-bank transfer should exist, right? And that's how we eventually bumped into UPI over the next couple of years. Started adopting UPI, became one of the first early adopters, along with JustPay and a couple of other companies in the market. So launched this very nice young application for, of course, all the millennials in the country. Scaled from around 0 to 200,000 users over a span of approximately 2 years, and mostly organically. So that was like that road journey on the B2C front. And interestingly, that is when we, of course, started realizing how painful the banking integrations are, because we had to integrate with some bank as a sponsor provider for UPI or IMPS APIs, as per the regulation. And that was like, a harrowing experience of 5 to 6 months of painful integration back and forth, both on the tech side and the business side, with one particular bank at that time. Initially, I thought this is maybe, more of a timing issue, and maybe things will get better over time. Or maybe it's a startup issue, and maybe big companies don't face it. Fast forward to 4 years later, happy to cover in detail if required. But in 2017, we got acquired by this company called Wibmo. And then I became the director of payments with them for around 2.5 years for India, Southeast Asia, a couple of regions. And then last year they got acquired by PayU. And that is when I realized that the problem that we had faced of spending close to half a year in banking API integrations was exactly the same that these guys were facing as well. And they were doing even more time because of being there with their own legacy roadmaps that they had. So that was like the final trigger. That this is much beyond a personal pain point. This is actually an industry pain point. And that's what led to me finally jumping the ship and solving this once and for all.
Correct. And so do you think the banking integrations are slow only in India, or is it across the world? I think India has done a great job when it comes to fintech creations, but why do you think banking integrations are so slow? It takes I think 4 to 6 months to do all the integrations.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Definitely, this is a global problem. This is not India specific problem, and of course that's one of the things that we have in mind as well as we expand in the future. But yeah, coming to India, I think two things work very well. One is, of course, this timing is pretty good, right? Because you can only build such a company, or you can only build an infrastructure once you have the basic core banking APIs in place, right? Or the bank should be willing to expose the APIs, in the first place, which is something that is there in India right now. Over the last, of course, UPI has been the trigger for that. So yeah, I think that is one thing, and for sure, fintech community in India has done a great job on that. People have started adopting like UPI by droves, and it has already overtaken the debit card and the credit card volume in the country. But yeah, I think generally speaking, the timing is one thing which really helps here. And second is this availability of these APIs from different banks, right? That's something that's missing in other countries. Like for example, US, like APIs are pretty much non-existent, maybe like 5% of the total. Yeah, and that's why companies have to resort to other methods like scraping and those stuff to get data out of the banking world. Yeah.
Correct. And you mentioned the previous company you sold it to PayU. Don't you think bigger companies like PayU, Paytm can also solve the same problem? Just trying to understand how you're different from others.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, good question. They can obviously, I mean, if they really want to get into this domain, they can definitely, get their hands dirty and try to solve that banking infrastructure, challenge. So a couple of points there. I think one is by default, if you look at it, a company always tries to play to its strengths, right? And it makes sense, of course, right? I mean, given that the world is so competitive out there, like the probably around 6-7 major payment gateways in the country, right? And there are many more that are trying to enter India as we speak. Yeah, if you consider that aspect, you'll realize that by default, payment gateways are in a competitive race with each other. And for them, the real source of strength right now is their volumes and the numbers on the SME front, or the customers front, so to say. So for them to take a step away from that, and get more on the core banking infrastructure side and build out APIs for platforms like lending platforms, or neobanking platforms and those kind of things, it's not impossible, but definitely a step away from their core direction and core strength. Like I would expect, and this is actually what is happening with the PayU as well, by the way. I would expect these companies to more evolve on the lines of SME neobanks, or more like enterprise-focused neobanks, because they have the strength there. Right? They already have customers and good lock-in there, right? Yeah. Rather than go to the infrastructure side, right? And it's very difficult for a company to do both, right? Like it's very difficult to be a great neobank and also be a great infrastructure provider at the same time.
Got it. And do you also have banking partners with you right now in India across Southeast Asia?
We do, yes, absolutely. So we have 3 major banks in India at different stages. Yeah, these are like 3 signed off banks from the business side, and then there are a couple of them in the pipeline in India. Yeah, and then there is one from Singapore. Yeah.
Got it. And what are the sort of products which come under Decentro? Are you only trying to be solve the problem for the lending market, or are you also looking at other particular verticals, and wanted to understand what are your how do you make money out of all the products?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sure. So yeah, I think on the product front, our objective is to really look at that side, because if you look at banking by default, it's very wide, right? And it's very hard for again, like one player to do like pretty much all the modules at the same time, right? So we're looking at specifically that sector, which is slightly undertapped and underserved at this point, which is specifically around bank accounts, right? So everything from your account opening to management, right, to money transfers, right? Statement analysis, and those kind of stuff. And this is different from like a screen scraping or maybe a statement analysis approach, because that's like a slightly manual and prone to error, because you have to upload statements somewhere, or take a PDF download and then do it. It's like you're converting from the online world to offline world and then going back to the online world, right? It's like slightly inefficient to do that. And that's why most of the solutions on that front are pretty expensive. So we're looking at more like core banking, right? Really, accounts is like a key component of it. So that's one major module that we have in the market right now. And that is, of course, the first module that we launched in the market as well, which is in July this year. The second module that we launched along with that is, again, on a tangent or corollary to that same thing. Because when you get into accounts, you have to think about onboarding, right? How do you onboard a customer or a business, depending on what kind of account it is? You have to do a KYC or KYB for the customer or the business. So that means you have to get into the domain of PAN, GST, and those kind of stuff. So yeah, we have solved for that. We've essentially aggregated multiple providers, under one single seamless roof for fully digital end-to-end onboarding cycle. So that's the KYC module. And then one thing which we are evaluating very actively, the next one, which is something we touched upon, is of course the lending module. So we're looking to be one of the technology service providers in the open credit network, which just came in India. So that is going to be a major product for us, going forward.
Correct. And it looks like it takes 4 to 6 months for banking integration to happen. But when it comes to Decentro, what are the timelines companies take to integrate with Decentro? Is there a substantial time difference?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the key USPs with us. So in fact, there are two key USPs that our customers love when they start working with us. The first one is like a massive reduction, and to give you an exact number, it's actually a 10x reduction, in the literal number terms. So 5 months the average time, and then what we have done with the first few customers is 2 weeks. So it's exactly a 10 times reduction in time and cost. So that's definitely one of the key USPs that we bring to the table. And the second one is that this is an ongoing process, because once you do the integration, the job is not done. You have to make sure that it remains stable, right, over time. Like there are consistent iterations, policy changes, RBI changes that come in. So instead of the company worrying about, okay, hey, something has changed on the regulatory front, or something has changed, on the API, now I need to spend, again, another half a month or 1 month to do some iterations, or changes. So those are things that get avoided, right? So it's like a fully managed, ready-made plug-and-play infrastructure for them, right? And they don't really need to worry about, okay, whether my infrastructure will go down or whether I need to put a team in place, because that's not my forte as a company. So that's the second major USP that comes for them for the long term.
Right. So, Rohit, you've been a part of the fintech space for such a long time, and what do you understand about what sort of opportunities do you foresee in fintech, especially when it comes to insurance, where a large part of population in our country do not have insurance, and also during the COVID period, a lot of people did not have access to microloans and lending. What do you think are some of the great opportunities you can foresee, and a lot of people can get into if they want to build some sort of product in this space?
Sure, definitely. Absolutely. So I think, firstly, I think it's very important for pretty much every entrepreneur to really identify if you're a B2C, like B2B, of course, will be a different domain. But if you're B2C and you're serving the customer directly, it's very important to identify that does that really fall under the top 10% of the Indian customer or the bottom 90%? And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but definitely that difference between those top 10% and bottom 90% spending capacity is massive, right? And so I think people often underestimate that difference when they're starting out, which has been, like, if you notice, a lot of the reasons for many of the e-commerce bubble pops that have happened, along the way. Because people simply overestimated the growth rate or the spending capacity of the customer. So that's one very important thing. So really understanding, do you want to solve for them, or the bottom 90%? And again, there's no real advantage or disadvantage for going one after the other. It's just that your business model will be completely different and your expectation needs to be completely different. That's one. And then I think once you decide that, assuming, let us say, if you are looking at solving something on the lending front, for example, on lending, I think, as you rightly mentioned, right, microcredit by default has been pretty much underserved till now in India, right? And not just microcredit, more like, if I were to distill it further, it's like systematic microcredit, right? Like systematically distributing and systematically collecting money back. People have been trying to do it from different means, and of course, there are a couple of great companies that are trying to solve it in the last while. And I think this sector will definitely be pretty huge, right? And it's really, really underserved right now. Although it will go through a cycle as well, because there are a few companies which are like trying to solve it in exactly the same way, and trying to just learn from each other or just copy each other, which is not really a good thing. The better way is to really pick a niche in that microcredit itself. Like, for example, pick maybe one vertical or target consumer, like traders, or blue collar workers, for example, and of course the SMEs. So that's very important to really differentiate and play to your strength again, based on your personal background or your previous company background. So that's something I think which is really, really valuable, and definitely a massive category which is yet to explode, right, in the country. Carrying on that line, if you extend it one level further and you go to the top 10% segment of the country, then you land into the realm of credit cards, right? Which is what Cred has visioned out to do, right? So, and again, even though Cred is, of course, decently big player now, in terms of numbers and capital and everything, but I think there's still scope there, right? And there's so much potential, like, just to play on the credit cards front or new types of credit models front, right? So I think that's one which is very important. Then coming to insurance specifically, I would rather say that again, picking the niche and giving very specific systematic insurance is again an underserved category, right? So general insurance, life insurance has been there for a while, and of course it's definitely underpenetrated because people are not yet really financially savvy. So even financial education can be a great thing, right? So just if you build out an amazing company and help people understand, gamify the whole thing, right? And I know a couple of people are trying to do that, like really educate the customer around how to manage finances, right? So yeah, I think these are few business models that I see are massive for the Indian country. Yeah.
Today I have an interesting stat for you to denote that the founder of Beautiful Lives increased the social media presence by 10x. They managed to publish consistently and effortlessly using a robust social media management tool called Social Pilot. Social Pilot is a cost-effective social media tool that helps businesses scale their social media marketing efforts. Use lifestylemastry.com/social pilot to get a 14-day free trial. You very rightly pointed out it's very important to see what sort of segment you're trying to solve, because the population is so huge that a lot of founders reach out to investors and say that the population is more than $1 billion and we're trying to solve the problem, right. But that is not how it happens. So very nicely put that you need to be very sure what sort of market problem that you're trying to solve. And Rohit, I wanted to understand what are your thoughts on consumer behavior and spending change? After is it going to change after COVID-19? Obviously, we all are working from home, and there's a lot of remote work is happening. But also, a lot of people are saying that we exactly know where the customer is right now. He's sitting in his home, and we can target him. But what are your thoughts? Do you think the spending change and consumer behavior will totally change when it comes to people going to offices and spending across different levels?
Sure. Absolutely. I think change is definitely bound to happen, given this is a massive event, and it has been completely unpredictable, right? So nobody was prepared for it, right? For some companies it has been a tailwind. For some companies it has been a headwind. And in fact, I'm surprised at the number of new business models that have come around, because of COVID. So that's something which is like and completely again a very appreciated impact, like the new business models that might emerge out of it. Coming to consumer spending, I think So that difference will continue to stay, right? That's definitely not going away. But the savings habit are going to change massively, right? So, and I'm sure you would have heard this a couple of times as well. Um, People will definitely look at savings very differently, right? So one of the things that will happen, and is in fact already happening, I can see that in my household as well, is people are start appreciating, okay, how much reserves do we have? Emergency reserves do we have for the long term? How much liquid cash do we have that we can withdraw from the market, right? For my investments and etc. And then yes, what is the future plan that we have to make ourselves self-sustainable, right? So one is the savings itself, which is relying on your cash and investments, and the second is how do you plan for your future in such a way that if this pandemic were to happen again, um, can you be self-sustainable, or can you sustain yourself without even worrying about your career, right? So yeah, I think this might see a boost of individual freelancers, coming to the place. Um, yeah, I think that the whole gig economy, might take a whole new level altogether, which will impact your customer spending directly, right? Because now, essentially, what's happening is, let us say, if people were earlier going out and they were, of course, doing impulsive shopping, right? So impulsive shopping or surprise shopping, so to say, right? Or discovery shopping, right? That was something which was pretty common. That's going to go down drastically. I think it has already gone down drastically, right? People will not really resort to impulse shopping now. Definitely not in the physical world. I mean, the percentage will be very, very low. Yeah. So these are a couple of trends that I see, which already happened and will continue.
Interesting. And, a lot of SMBs have been impacted in India, and looks like there'll be, lakhs of jobs which will get impacted in the next coming months. Obviously, we need to reskill ourselves and see where we can go from there. But what steps should SMBs be taken? Obviously, startups also do not. I'm not very clear about the laws, but not very sure if startups come into the SMB category. But what are your thoughts, and what steps should SMBs take to recover from this impact?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, people always forget, that behind every SMB or behind every business there is essentially one person, right? Or maybe two people, right? So in most cases, at least 80-90% of them, right? And so it's very, very important for all the founders and the entrepreneurs to really reach out for support, right? And just talk to each other as much as possible. Right? The worst thing that will happen is that, okay, the business survives, but the founder doesn't survive, right? That's something nobody would like, right? So I think that's very, very important to really make sure that you're really, stable from a feelings perspective, emotional perspective, right? And you really share with each other. That's something very important. And then, I think from the business front and something that the SMEs can do, a couple of points are definitely pretty evident and are already in the public, but one point that can stand out is to really be prudent around how to maximize your ROI and treat this as an opportunity, right? It's very hard to do that because the first instance is, okay, hey, everything is down, or what will happen? It's just to go in a state of panic, right? But that's not really the best way. The best way is definitely to see, okay, can this be an opportunity for us to really revamp ourselves, right? For example, it's quite likely that the SME might be overspending on talent, right? Or maybe overspending on any resources, maybe even office space. They might not even need the office space, for example. I think that's a great reevaluation to do, and maybe even make yourself, increase your whole gross margin, right, by reducing your cost. So these are things that can easily happen, and this is the best time to really reevaluate that. So I would rather say the SME to focus on these things rather than focusing on what's happening in the market, the trends in the market, which are outside our control. Yeah.
Got it. And coming back to Decentro, I was wondering, how companies like Plaid and Visa, do you think they have also made those kind of inroads, in India and other Southeast Asian countries?
Yeah. So Plaid actually, if you notice, if you look at the journey of Plaid, right, they started out by really helping you connect your application to a particular bank's data, right? So helping you fetch the data, and then they realize that, okay, the banks in the US are not really so savvy that they can open up APIs. In fact, most of them, as we discussed, don't really have APIs, to start with. So the best way was to enable a uniform login screen and then do a screen scraping approach to fetch the bank statements and the balances for these consumers, and which actually has landed them in soup as well sometimes, over time, because it's a slightly gray area, right? In terms of how do you handle security when it comes to this? Because the question is, who owns the data, right? If the bank owns the data, then is the bank really authorizing them, to do it? So those are questions which they have faced, and definitely they have done decently well in, managing themselves along the way, and still growing despite those questions that have come in, which is a phenomenal job that they've done. No doubt about that. But as I said, so that scraping itself is something that may have worked very well in the US. I doubt that that same thing will work in India, right? And maybe a couple of other countries close to India. I think one, of course, because the banks by default have APIs. So like that excuse of not having the APIs goes away, or not excuse, maybe like a reason for them that goes away. That doesn't exist now. So I think definitely it's much safer and a much tightly coupled approach that you have to take with the bank as compared to scraping the data. So that's something which will be very different, for Plaid and a couple of other players when they start entering or looking at Southeast Asia. And by default, like once a company gets acquired, because I've gone through that journey, once and twice, the priorities change, right? And it takes at least a couple of years for the company to really find track on what's the next thing, because this like couple of years are easily gone in the whole acquisition process. So that's the roadmap that we see for them right now. Yeah.
Got it. And for Decentro, what are your go-to-market strategies? Because distribution becomes really important once you have a great product. So just wondering, what strategies have you acquired to gain more number of customers on board?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the good thing in India and in general in a couple of these countries right now is that since the number of players are relatively few, in the sense that infrastructure in itself is a new domain. So apart from us, a couple of other players that exist and have just come out in the last couple of years in the Indian market. So since the domain is new, people are still searching for solutions, right? And many people have still not found the perfect solution among these. And many of them have still not even started searching because they just started the companies, or they just came out in the last few years with a new financial services business sector, also business vertical. So that's a great thing, which means that inbound is going to be high. So we have definitely leveraged inbound. In fact, all our customers are inbound, right? So we didn't reach out to them. They came to us, found us through Google, of course, our blogs, right? Social media, right? So that's one thing which continues to grow, and we will continue to leverage that. So personal social media is going to be another key channel. Definitely leveraging on my own personal connections for the last 6 years in the fintech industry. And then really doing good digital marketing to try to establish good word of mouth. That's one. And then I think once that gets streamlined, we do have a pipeline set for the outbound channel, which will involve more of enterprises.
Got it. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
It's actually I think a book which people might not have heard. So there's one Steve Jobs biography, which is the famous one. Right. But there's a different one which is called Becoming Steve Jobs. So that's a relatively lesser known, but it's like, at least in my opinion, and definitely a couple of other people, this is much better than that, because this shows like the real struggles of Steve Jobs, which are not visible in the first one. So this does not glorify Steve Jobs. This actually tells you how he was a human being, how he made those mess ups along the way, and how he recovered from them. So definitely great one.
Correct. We'll put that in the show notes. And do you have any favorite online tools? Example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Yeah, I love Notion. Notion is great for pretty much all my notes. Reside there. There's another one called Motion, which is basically a browser extension, which helps
Right.
me, save time and all that. Yeah.
Interesting. And if you could go back in time when you started Decentro, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
I think probably too soon to ask that for me, because we are just like 6 months old right now, right? So yeah, more like 8 months actually. But I think definitely hard to get an answer on this. I think we're doing fairly good, I would say. I'm definitely proud of what we have accomplished, in a short span of 8 months. And Y Combinator definitely has been an amazing partner for this journey. Major role that they have played, and definitely a couple of our angels as well. I think we're doing fairly good, and probably I'll be able to answer better, after some time. Yeah.
Correct. And did you have to go to US to be part of Y Combinator batch, or was it all online?
No, this was fully online. Yeah, this was fully online. Yeah.
Very interesting. And Rohit, what you before the call we talked about you looking to scale up operations and looking for people to join. What sort of talent are you looking for when it comes to working in a fintech company? Does somebody need to be from the fintech background to work in fintech startups?
Sure. Not necessarily. To answer that fintech question, definitely. I mean, so it depends on the role as well. For example, if you're looking at currently we're looking at heavily ramping up our engineering. So we're getting like more demand that we can fulfill, which is a good problem to have. So we're getting like a lot of customers, who are asking us for new and new features, and we just don't have the bandwidth, to fulfill that right now. So we're taking that gradually as we go along. So definitely looking to ramp up engineering, really smart developers. So we have, definitely have a very, very high bar on hiring our engineering talent, because essentially it's all product, right? Product is the foundation for us, and given the business that we are in, and the quality needs to be maintained very high. So so definitely looking at great developers who have worked in API microservices, those kind of domain earlier. And looking for that thrill, for 0 to 1 or that next 1 to 10 journey. The second thing that we are looking at is on the business front. So a couple of people who essentially can be owners of products or divisions, so to say. So for example, an owner of lending module, owner of say the cards module, for example. And drive both product and the business strategy. So you can say that they're like EIRs, so to say, or entrepreneurs.
Or the P&L owners. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So those are the kind of people we're looking at. Definitely there, fintech background is super helpful. And we definitely give priority to that. Yeah.
Correct. And Rohit, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Decentro?
So I think definitely my Twitter handle, that's Sunnyboy Rohit. That's one. So I'm very active on Twitter over the last few years. That's the best way. Or of course, like directly emailing me, on my email ID, which is rohit@decentro.tech. These are the best channels.
Got it. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking your time speaking to us. I really enjoyed speaking to you about fintech and the company you're building.
Thanks, Rohit. Same here. Yeah. Awesome.
If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure you visit startupsmagazine.co.uk, a magazine in digital and print where they champion tech startups and entrepreneurs. You can find the latest and most innovative startups in each issue and the upcoming magazine focused on female founders and women in tech. They also have a podcast called The Serial Entrepreneur, interviewing female founders in the lead up to the issue. For the November-December issue, the magazine will focus on sports tech and reflecting on the year of 2020 and how startups will face 2021. Subscribe for free on their website, startupsmagazine.co.uk.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.